I still remember the exact sound of her voice that day. Sharp, cold, like I didn't belong in the same room as her. "Please stop touching my kitchen," she said, not even looking at me. "You're going to ruin something." My kitchen. I stood there with a dish towel in my hands, the same hands that once rocked my son to sleep, the same hands that kneaded dough on that very counter for more than 40 years. And in that moment, standing in my own house, I felt like a guest who had overstayed her welcome. I'm 68 years old now, and I have lived long enough to know when someone wants you invisible. My son's wife wanted me gone without ever saying the word. She got what she wanted, too. Slowly, quietly, piece by piece. What she didn't know, what neither of them knew at first, was that the deed to that house still had my name on it. And that's where this story truly begins. Because before the truth came out, before the arguments, before the papers were pulled from a locked drawer and the room fell silent, everything was already breaking. My son was no longer the boy I raised. I watched him change right in front of me. Pride wrapped around him. Distance settled into his eyes. That kitchen became the first place I was pushed away from. At night, I heard their voices behind closed doors. Low, careful, quiet in the kind of way that tells you your name is being spoken without you in the room. Decisions were being made about my life while I sat alone, just a few steps away. Then one quiet afternoon, with just a few simple words, everything finally shattered. The same room where I had been told to keep my hands to myself began to shake with fear. The woman who claimed that kitchen went silent. My son stood frozen, hearing the truth he never expected to hear. And in that moment, I stood between two heavy choices, one shaped by pain and one shaped by mercy. But none of that happened all at once. It never does. It started small, always does. After my husband passed, the house felt too quiet, too big. My son asked if he and his new wife could move in for a while, just until they saved enough, just until they got on their feet. I said yes without hesitation. A mother doesn't calculate when her child is in need. A mother opens the door. At first, she was polite, careful with her words, smiling with her teeth, but not her eyes. She thanked me for dinners. She complimented the curtains. She told people how lucky she was to have such a kind mother-in-law. Then the rules started. What should be cooked, when the laundry should run, where I should sit, which shelves were mine and which were no longer mine. And slowly, my son stopped meeting my eyes when she spoke over me. By the time she told me to stop touching the kitchen, I already felt like a ghost in my own home. Still, I stayed quiet because I loved my son, because I wanted peace, because I believed things would ease with time. They didn't. They got worse. Whispers turned into conversations I wasn't invited into. They talked about renovations as if I didn't exist. They moved furniture without asking. My room became the smallest one in the house. I ate alone most nights. And all the while, they believed one thing with absolute confidence, that the house belonged to them now, that I had nothing left, that I was simply in the way. What they didn't realize was that I had made a promise to my husband before he died, a promise about that house, a promise about our future, a promise about protection, and I had honored it quietly, legally, completely. The truth was waiting, patient, heavy. And when it finally entered that house, the walls themselves seemed to listen. Voices rose, hands trembled, words were spoken that could never be taken back. And in the middle of all of it, my son looked at me in a way he hadn't in years, not as furniture in the corner, but as the woman who had built the ground beneath his feet. If you've ever been pushed aside by your own family, if you've ever been made to feel like a burden in the life you created, if you've ever stayed silent just to keep the peace, then this story is for you. And before the truth fully unfolds, before that kitchen becomes the center of everything, before pride finally collides with reality, I ask just one simple thing. If you're listening right now and you feel even a piece of this in your heart, please like this story, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe to this channel. Your support keeps these voices alive, and it reminds people like me that we are not alone. Now, let me take you back to the very beginning, to the day they first walked through my front door with suitcases in their hands and plans I was never meant to hear. After they moved in, the house felt smaller than ever. Every corner seemed to remind me that I wasn't the one in charge anymore. I would wake in the mornings and the kitchen would already be buzzing, not with warmth or laughter, but with an energy that made me feel invisible. My son and his wife were already there, moving about as if I wasn't even part of this home. At first, I tried to adjust. I reminded myself quietly that this was temporary, that patience and love could soften any tension. I made breakfast, thinking of the days when my husband was alive, when laughter filled these rooms naturally, when my son had looked at me as his safe place. But those mornings, the smiles were tight, and their conversations stopped when I walked in. One afternoon, while I was washing the dishes, I overheard her speaking to my son. I didn't need to strain my ears. Her voice carried that sharp edge I had grown used to. "Mom just doesn't understand," she said, tossing her words like stones. "She's from another time. She can't keep up with us." My heart clenched. Another time, another place, and I was meant to feel like a stranger here. But I didn't say anything. I dried my hands and kept going. Mothers know how to wait. Mothers know how to survive silence. Over the weeks, small things began to feel like mountains. The pantry was reorganized without my consent. My favorite coffee mug disappeared, only to turn up in her special dishes cabinet. I noticed that whenever I tried to help, her eyes would narrow. The house, which had once been my sanctuary, now felt like a place where I had to tread carefully, as if one wrong move would provoke some invisible punishment. Then there were the whispers at night. I didn't eavesdrop intentionally, but their voices carried through the walls. I learned things I wish I hadn't. My son had started to take her side in every minor disagreement, and she plotted quietly. I could feel it in the way she placed furniture, in the way she spoke to the neighbors, in the way she described me as difficult or old-fashioned. I began to notice my son's change more clearly. There was a hesitation when he looked at me, a shadow in his eyes. The boy who once climbed into my lap to show me a drawing, the boy who begged me to bake cookies for him late at night, was becoming someone else entirely. And I didn't understand how this had happened. I wanted to reach him, to explain, to remind him of who we were, But every time I tried, her presence would stop me. She didn't just control the space. She controlled the flow of our lives. One evening, after dinner, I sat quietly in my favorite chair, near the window. The house had grown dark, and the hum of the refrigerator seemed louder than usual. I heard my son whispering something to her. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was sharp. I felt that same old ache, the feeling that I was fading, that the home I built with my husband, the life I lived, didn't matter to the people I loved the most. I went to bed that night with a tightness in my chest. I thought about the past, about the years I had poured into raising my son, the dinners, the bandages on scraped knees, the late nights listening to heartbreaks he didn't share with anyone else. And now, in the house that once carried our laughter, I felt like a guest who had overstayed her welcome. Days passed, weeks passed, and the tension grew thicker. Then came the first small confrontation. I had just begun to wash the dishes after lunch when she appeared in the doorway. "Mom, don't touch that," she said sharply. "That's my spot." My hands froze. I had been washing dishes here for decades. This was the rhythm of my life. But I swallowed the words rising in my throat. I couldn't start a fight. Not yet. Not without the right moment. I left the kitchen, carrying my dish towel like a shield. Every day, every small comment, every subtle insult piled onto my chest until breathing itself felt heavy. But I kept silent. Patience, I reminded myself. Strategy, observation. Weeks later, I discovered that they had begun making plans for renovations, furniture purchases, and even landscaping, without asking me a single question. My son nodded along to every suggestion she made. He smiled, agreeing, as if my opinion was irrelevant. I felt a pain I couldn't describe. Every memory in that house was being replaced, rewritten without me, as though my life there had already ended. Then came the night that changed everything. I had been in my room, folding laundry quietly, when I heard my son and his wife speaking in urgent tones. She was upset about money. He was agreeing with her. I crept closer to the doorway. They didn't see me, and I heard something that made my heart pound in a way it hadn't for decades. "She should not even be in this house," she said. "It's ours now. We've done everything for her, and she still expects." Her words trailed off, but I didn't need the rest. That was it. The truth, in their own voices. The audacity, the betrayal, the idea that a house built with love, sweat, and decades of family history could suddenly belong to her, and not me. I went to bed that night with a plan forming, quiet and deliberate. Revenge wasn't about anger. It was about truth. It was about making them understand, finally, that the foundation they were standing on wasn't theirs to claim, and I would wait for the right time. The following morning, I began preparing. I reviewed the documents my husband had left, every paper, every clause, every legal safeguard I had quietly maintained. I traced the history of the deed, the will, every corner of ownership. For years, they believed I had nothing. For years, they assumed their control was absolute. They didn't realize that the weight of history, love, and legal authority was still mine. I didn't confront them immediately. I observed, I recorded their patterns, their assumptions, their mistakes. Each day, their confidence grew, but so did mine. I knew the moment would come when silence would turn into revelation, when years of mistreatment would be met with undeniable truth. And then came the moment they never anticipated. A simple question from me, a calm tone, a few words that carried more weight than they could ever imagine. They froze, stared, and the arrogance that had filled the house began to crack. My son looked at me in a way he hadn't in years. He saw the mother he had ignored, the woman he had forgotten, and suddenly, the reality of his choices hit him like a wall. For the first time, she realized that her control was an illusion. The house, the renovations, the furniture, they were still mine, every bit of it. And the kitchen, my kitchen, would finally belong to the one who had always been its heart. It was a quiet afternoon, the kind that seems ordinary until it isn't. I stood in the hallway, watching my son and his wife bustling about, unaware that I had finally reached the moment I had been waiting for. The house hummed with normal activity, but underneath that hum was the tension I had nurtured quietly for months, the tension of truth waiting to be spoken. I took a deep breath and stepped into the kitchen. I had rehearsed this in my mind, but even rehearsals could not prepare me for the satisfaction that came with the first look of shock on their faces. "Mom, what are you doing?" my son asked, his voice tight, almost fearful. I held up a single document, letting my fingers brush the paper like it was a weapon made of justice itself. "I'm showing you something," I said calmly, "something you've been trying to ignore." Her eyes narrowed. "What is that?" she demanded. "Another one of your games?" I smiled faintly because this wasn't a game. This was truth. "It's the deed," I said, "the deed to this house. Every corner, every inch, every nail still belongs to me. Always has." There was silence, not the polite, awkward silence of a conversation paused. This was the silence that falls when the ground beneath your feet shifts without warning. She stepped back, eyes wide. My son froze, his confident posture unraveling. "You what?" he stammered. "How?" I didn't need to explain the details. The legal documents, the promises to my husband, the careful planning over the years, they all spoke louder than words. He had assumed I was powerless. He had assumed the house was theirs. But assumptions have a way of collapsing when confronted with reality. Her hands trembled as she reached for the edge of the counter. This isn't possible," she whispered, her voice cracking. "It is," I said softly, and for the first time in months, the kitchen felt warm again, not from the heat of the oven, but from the sense of rightful ownership restored. My son sank into the chair, face pale, the boy I had raised, the boy who once clutched my hand to cross the street, the boy who trusted me above all others, was finally seeing the weight of his choices, seeing how he had been swayed, manipulated, and led to turn against me. I walked slowly to the center of the room, letting the calmness in my steps contrast with the storm in their eyes. "Do you understand what you've done?" I asked quietly. "Do you understand that for months you treated me as though I didn't exist in my own home?" Tears welled up in her eyes, unguarded and raw. I had never expected this. I had anticipated defiance, anger, perhaps even an apology, But not this. Vulnerability, fear, realization. She began, words stumbling. I didn't know we thought. You thought wrong, I said simply, and you acted as though the house, my home, was yours to take. You forgot that the woman who raised your husband, who built this life with him, was still here, watching, waiting, protecting. My son finally looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw regret in his eyes, but it was mixed with the weight of disbelief. Mom, I never... You did, I interrupted gently. You turned your back on me, just as she demanded. You let her rewrite my home, my life, my memories. But you didn't account for one thing. I held up the papers again, letting the afternoon light catch the edges, glinting like truth itself. I still have the control. I still hold the foundation of this house and of my family. And today you see that. Her knees trembled, and finally she sank to the floor, trembling in disbelief. My son knelt beside her, shame washing over his features, as if he could suddenly feel every slight, every cold word, every dismissive glance he had cast my way. I could have screamed, yelled, demanded apologies, and they would have been hollow, but I didn't. I stood there quietly, letting them absorb the reality. The power of patience, of silent observation, of knowing your worth, it is stronger than any rage or any anger. This house is mine, I said softly. It was built with love, with sweat, with every moment of my life, and it will remain a place of respect, a place of family, and a place where no one treats me as though I don't belong. For a long moment, no one spoke. The air was thick with emotions, shock, fear, regret, and finally, understanding. Then my son did something I never expected. He reached for my hand, trembling, hesitant. Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't see. I didn't understand. Her voice was quieter now, almost a whisper. We were wrong. I didn't yell. I didn't demand more. I simply allowed the silence to hold us, to let them truly feel the weight of their actions. And in that moment, I realized that the real victory wasn't the papers or the house or even the authority I held. The real victory was seeing them recognize the truth, seeing them understand that the love they had taken for granted was not something that could be erased or stolen. The kitchen, once a battlefield of control and fear, became the place of revelation. The room where I had been pushed aside had become the room where justice met mercy. And for the first time in months, I felt the warmth of belonging again. After that afternoon, the house felt different, not because anything had changed materially. The furniture was still where it had been. The walls still held the same paint, the windows the same light, but because the air had shifted, the tension that had weighed on me for months, the quiet hostility that had turned my own home into a place of fear, had finally lifted. My son sat across from me at the kitchen table, his hands wrapped around a cup of coffee he hadn't touched, his eyes wide with something I hadn't seen in a long time, humility. Mom, he said softly, voice trembling, I didn't know how much I hurt you. I didn't see it at all. I followed her. I looked at him, at the boy I had raised, the man I had loved unconditionally even when he didn't deserve it, and I felt my heart swell and ache at the same time. "I know," I said gently. "I've known for a long time. But knowing doesn't make it easier, does it?" He shook his head. "No, it doesn't." Then, slowly, almost hesitantly, he reached for my hand. The same hand that had held him when he was a boy, that had comforted scraped knees and heartbreaks, that had worked tirelessly for this family. He held it now, and in that touch, there was recognition. Recognition of mistakes, of love lost and found again, and of the woman who had always been his anchor. His wife, sitting across from us, bowed her head, tears glistening in her eyes. I'm sorry too," she said quietly. "I didn't know. I didn't see it from your side. I thought we were helping, but we were taking over. I'm sorry." The words were simple, not dramatic, not theatrical, but they carried the weight of months, even years, of misunderstanding and tension. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't expected. Forgiveness isn't about speeches or grand gestures. It's about seeing someone truly acknowledge their mistakes, seeing them understand the harm they caused, and allowing them a chance to make it right. I took a deep breath and smiled, the kind of smile that carries decades of love and patience. "We all make mistakes," I said, "but this house, this family, it's bigger than any one argument, any one mistake. What matters is that we learn, that we remember what love is, and that we don't let pride blind us." My son nodded, tears slipping down his cheeks. "I promise, Mom. I won't forget this. I won't take you for granted again." And just like that, the tension in the room dissolved. The hostility that had once made me feel like a stranger in my own home evaporated. The kitchen, once a battlefield, felt warm again. It felt like home. We spent the evening talking, really talking, in ways we hadn't for years. Stories from my youth, stories from my son's childhood, laughter that had been missing for far too long. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't magic, but it was real and it was healing. Later that night, as I went to bed, I looked around the house, the home I had built with love, with sweat, with decades of care. And I felt a deep sense of peace, not because I had won an argument or because I had proved my point, but because I had chosen love over anger, forgiveness over pride, and family over bitterness. And in that choice, I realized something profound. Sometimes the greatest strength isn't in holding your ground, but in opening your heart. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't in revenge, but in letting go and letting love guide the way. From that day forward, the house became a place of reunion, a place where family gathered not out of obligation, but out of understanding. My son and his wife learned to respect the history of this home, to see me not as a guest, not as someone in the way, but as the heart of the family. And me, I felt whole again. I felt seen again. I felt the weight of years lift off my shoulders as we embraced, as we laughed, as we simply existed together in peace. If there's one thing I want you to take from my story, it's this: never underestimate the power of truth, patience, and forgiveness. The world can turn against you, family can misunderstand you, and life can feel unbearably cruel. But when you hold on to love, when you stand for what is right and just, reconciliation is possible, healing is possible, family is possible. And to anyone listening feeling invisible, unheard, or pushed aside. Remember this: your voice matters. Your place matters. Your heart matters. If this story touched you, if it reminded you of someone you love or a moment you've experienced, please like this video, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe to our channel. Stories like this keep us connected, remind us of the power of love, and prove that even in the darkest moments, family and forgiveness can light the way. So, hold on to the ones you love. Speak your truth when the time is right. And never forget that home is where the heart is. And sometimes it takes courage, patience, and love to remind everyone else of that truth.